During this video segment, I want to cover the benchmarks reports that are in Curriculum Track. They're the reports at the top, these four right here. So let's begin with the courses by benchmark for this particular school. So right now I'm looking at the science benchmarks. I could change to the math and go to whatever program I want. Let's just stay in science. And what it does is it lists all the benchmarks that you currently have for science. Those can be seen here as well. So it's taking all these benchmarks in the order that they were uploaded for you. And for each of those then, it's showing which course or courses it's attached to. So this first one is attached to Science Kindergarten, and it currently is not being assessed, but it's being instructed in one unit. You can go ahead and click on this if you want to see what unit it's actually being instructed in. Notice the zeros are not hyperlinks because there's really nothing to see. So if I click on this one, notice there's 3 different units where it's being instructed. If you look at this one is actually being covered in 3 different grade levels. First, second, and third grade science it's being taught in. And maybe that's okay, but maybe those 3 teachers should put their heads together to make sure that they're not over teaching it or teaching the same thing over and over 3 years in a row. Next, let's go to the benchmarks by course. And this looks at the same data, but it looks at it from the other direction. In other words, it groups them by course. And I could pull out an individual course. I'm going to go ahead and choose all courses, and I'll list them. Here's first grade science, second grade science, third grade science, and so on. So as we look at first grade science, it says there are 29 benchmarks attached to third grade science. So here they are, our first grade science. And out of those 29 benchmarks that should be taught in first grade, currently 3 of those are being assessed. Here's one, here's another, and there must be another one somewhere as well. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. And 23 of them are being instructed. And so these numbers show once again where they're being instructed and how many times they're being instructed. Also, notice we can find things like this one right here, and this benchmark here. Both of those are never being instructed or assessed. And maybe that's okay, but maybe it's an oversight. So this report allows you to find some of those gaps in the curriculum and see if that gap is a problem, or if it should be taught in another grade, or if it's just not real relevant for your school. Next, let's go to the benchmark map by grade. And so again, I think I will choose all grades for science. And this is more of a graphical overview of that same data. Again, it shows all the benchmarks in the order they were uploaded. And what the gray signifies is it says what grades it's attached to. In other words, this benchmark is supposed to be taught in kindergarten. So the grayed out area or the shaded area is where it should be taught. But then what the A's and I's show you is it being taught there? And if so, is it being instructed or assessed? So notice these first ones these are all supposed to be taught in kindergarten, and it looks like they are all being instructed. Here's one that isn't being instructed or assessed. So again, a gap there. Here's one, interestingly enough, it's being instructed in kindergarten like it should be, but it's also being instructed in third grade for some reason. So if we want to, we can click on that and learn more about that and see some of the information related to it. Likewise, we can work our way down. So here's a whole bunch of them that are being taught in third grade that are first grade benchmarks. Here we're seeing a bunch that are assessed. So here's a whole bunch of them that should be taught in third grade, but they're not. They're actually being taught in fourth grade, and in fact they're even being assessed in fourth grade. So that's kind of how you read that report. And again, there might be good reason for it, but if so, you may want to consider changing what grades they're taught in by going to the courses database and attaching the benchmarks to the correct grades there. We actually have another video on that topic. The last report that I want to cover is this very same map, but instead of looking at it from grade levels, it looks at it from courses instead. And it's going to look very, very similar to the grade level one. Just lists instead of grade 1, it's going to say grade or science first grade and so forth. This report probably is a little bit more useful in the high school grades, whereas I would say the benchmark by grade is more relevant in elementary classes, and this is probably more relevant in the high school. An example of that might be maybe you have a class like physics and you have kids that are in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade all in that physics class. And yet you don't want it to show as if a benchmark is being covered by all 10th graders if it's only a few students that are actually in the physics class. Whereas here it would show physics and biology, physical science, and so forth. So again, these reports are very useful once your teachers go through the process of attaching benchmarks to their various units. And it's not something that it's necessarily that they're doing wrong, but it is definitely a nice gauge to see, you know, what are the gaps and overlaps in our curriculum, and those areas where there are gaps, is that okay? And it allows you to have some very meaningful discussions with your teachers about their use of benchmarks.